Welcome back, everybody. For those of you watching for the very first time, we're not in our usual place. We're not recording and filming from where we normally do. It's COVID-19, and we are experiencing this life experience from all different perspectives from wherever we are in the world. And my biggest wish coming into this interview today is that when we do publish this episode and we are looking back at this video and we are looking back at this interview, that COVID-19 is something that we're talking about from the past. And we're all celebrating health, safety, and of course, we're recognizing the strength of those frontline career people who were helping us through it. So whether you're a mother watching this episode, or you're a teacher, a nurse, a doctor, a parent, or someone that was struggling with an issue that you felt really alone watching the world go through COVID-19, I hope today that we're all celebrating the past tense. Strong is about a journey that takes women, teenage girls, females, through an experience of life, and it's all about sharing our life stories. Season 1 is about creating a community of strong female role models. With every episode that goes published, with every time that I'm able to talk about strong, I realize more and more the story of one woman is really a story of all of us. We are interconnected, and if COVID-19 has taught me anything, it's taught me that the pain of someone from another part of the world will at some point trickle back to affect each and every one of us. Strong is about connecting us on a global community. And it's not my story, it's our story. So today brings Sahar. Welcome to our journey, and thank you so much for agreeing to be with me on this new style of video interviewing and for allowing Strong to continue this journey around the world.
Thank you, Maria. I really appreciate you having me on your show. I'm an ardent admirer. I've watched all your interviews, and you have a natural way of making your guests feel at ease, that they really open up and we are allowed to go into their sacred space and learn from the stories. Thank you again.
Thank you, Sahar. Thank you for being with us. I know that right now we're all experiencing COVID-19 in different ways. And I
Yes.
know that for some of us, this kind of connection might mean the world to us.
Yes.
So I know that with this very first question, if I were to ask you this question before COVID-19, maybe you would have answered it a little bit different. But with all of who you are today, who is Sahar?
It's a very deep question to which I had to think when you sent me the questionnaire. And if I were to define myself, I would say I am, like the rest of us, a complex human being who is trying to find her place, not only in her family, in her society, but in the world at large, and who always questioned, thought about the meaning of life, how can she enrich it, and where does she fit in that big web of life. And it is honestly something that has been with me like a thread, since the day I was born. I don't see myself as a woman. I always saw myself as a person. It's almost maybe because we grew up, we were raised in a non-gender specific family. The same rules applied to me as they did to my older brother and my younger sister. And that kind of helped me to survive as a human being and to connect with people as a human being, regardless of whatever sex, nationality, or religion that they were. It's an ongoing discovery of self-identity. I think because most of us tend to label ourselves according to where we came from or what family or country, we're born into. For me, my identity has been about taking all these labels off, what I call unbox,
Mm.
and to exist as a person, to allow myself connect with other people and not be separated by the boundaries that we place on ourselves. Does that make sense? So
It
it's
makes
almost
total sense.
I'm undressing all these identities that I'm born with in order to fit, to belong, um, in a community that is not boxed by its identity or background or upbringing.
And this is why I love this very first question. And I know it's a big question. I know it's a challenging question. But I think one of the biggest struggles that young people have is understanding that we have all these different parts. It's like peeling an onion. There's so many
Yes,
layers to us. And it's great to hear every woman and every female in season 1 talk about all those different layers, because then we understand, if we're young and we're growing and we don't have the experiences of life, we understand there's not a one size fits all. There's so
yes,
many facets to who we are. What
yes.
does it feel like to be you on a typical day, knowing that you're doing all these different things and being all these different roles?
In all honesty, I don't feel that I wear different hats. I think if I were doing that, I would feel slightly schizophrenic. And what I've always strived for, well, since let's say since 1990, because 1990 was a huge turning point for me, um, I learned to become me in whatever that I'm doing. So me does mentoring for a certain time during the day. Me does whatever housework. Me is a friend. Me is a sister. Me was a daughter. I think I always looked for a home to belong to. And what I've learned throughout my 56, 57 years old journey is that you belong to who you are. So my typical day isn't typical. I'm open to whatever the day brings, particularly now during COVID-19, especially now. I had to unlearn making, boundaries, and I had to stay open for whatever the day brings, which I found to be nice and freeing. So I found myself not under pressure, so I can still be who I am whenever it's appropriate for it to be. But usually, Maria, I would say I'd like to start my day on my own and I'd like to finish my day on my own.
Yeah.
It's almost, I'd like to think, what am I going to do today? And then at the end of the day, I kind of wrap it up in my mind, just reflect on it. What was today about? What was important? What got done? What needs to be done tomorrow? So I value that time alone at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day. Usually, I would also work in my garden, which I absolutely adore. It has helped keep me sane, um, because it's the time to connect with nature. I have 4 cats and I love them. So I always make time to spend a little bit of time with each of them. I mean, it's important for them as much as it's important for me, really, that connection.
Mhm.
And what I learned from that is, to appreciate any sentient being, really, whether it's a person or an animal. What I love most about animals is that they show you this unconditional love because they can't talk, they can't communicate, there is no expectation, there's no belief system. What did she mean by that? What did he mean by that? It's just you and your pets, and I love that.
Mhm.
And then, of course, I see clients online or in person, but I have been working online for a long time. So maybe this COVID thing is not a huge change for me, but it helped me to focus more on what I can do. When I was in the corporate world, you learn to plan everything. You learn to plan things for your clients for the next 3 years, 5 years. And then when I left the corporate world, I had to teach myself to be in the now and to accept what the day brings. So I'm glad I did back then. I did a lot of hard work on myself. And what I'm enjoying about now is that you can be totally open if you choose to just accept what gift the day bring along.
That's
So
amazing.
that's probably my typical day.
Hearing you say it, I kind of felt like we were on this little flow. It felt like it
Yeah,
was in flow. How did you get that way? How did you learn that you could appreciate it and kind of make it flow?
I think it's consistent, intentional hard work every day. So you learn a little bit every day. I also did a holistic certificate training certificate course, in holistic therapy. And for 4 years, we had to put ourselves under a microscope and we had to keep a journal. And that helped me kind of catch, my negative patterns. It helped me to become more aware as to where I am, where am I present in the past, in the present, in the future. It's self-awareness that you teach yourself that you can do on your own. And I think that's the beginning. And it kind of felt empowering, because when I've got the reins in my hands, then I can begin to create or design my day, eventually my life, with the best skills and abilities that I have. So, in all honesty, it took, I don't know, 25, 30 years. And each day you learn a little bit more. And it's important not to give up and to focus on what you've learned rather than what needs to be accomplished. And that's what kept me going.
It's so important, isn't it, not to give up. That I'm going to pick up on that, because I know that when I work with the youth, they feel that it's so hard, and we spend more time trying to convince them not to give up. And it's almost like you have to try and make them believe it, and you have to believe it first, that for them to kind of buy into it. But what would you say would have been
You're right.
the key to realizing, you know what, Sahar, you're on a journey. It's hard. We're not going to give up.
I don't think that it was one thing that taught me that, it's a process, and you go through it and you go through the pain, and then you realize one day, I had enough disappointments. Why am I beating myself up? And you stop doing that and you learn to shift. Okay, let me think about what I have achieved. Let me think about what I have learned. And once I've learned to to make that shift, if you will, to notice what was right rather than what was wrong, then it became easy, like a domino effect. But I think young people, and I have a theory about young people, and really they have a harder life now than we did when I was growing up, if you like. Because when we grew up, there were no distractions. The biggest distraction was television, which wasn't really a distraction because your parents controlled that, and when you can see it, and it was only after homework. But now with all this technology, I see my young, nieces, nephews, things like that. I see them put on themselves quite a lot of pressure. I mean, I felt pressure. I've put that pressure on myself. No one did. But inadvertently, I think young people do, because they're struggling. Chemically, their hormones are changing and they're not aware of that. They want to be individuals. They want to prove to themselves that I can do it on my own. And I went through that. I went through trying to fix everything by myself, not realizing I have somebody older, like a parent. I mean, you don't always have to have your parents, but I was fortunate enough to have great parents that I could always go back to them, not be judged, and ask for help. And from what I remember, the biggest stressor was your friends at school. You didn't want to appear to be any weaker or less smart or less whatever it is.
Yeah.
So, I've put myself in that competition. They didn't, but
Mm.
you absorb it. And I think, without realizing, but I think if you are a parent and you are close to just observing your child, you'll know what to do. You'll know what to do, what to say. What worked with me is getting those messages indirectly. But if my parents were to lecture me, I wouldn't listen. I would be really defiant, and I would even insist even more on sorting it out myself.
Mm.
A friend of mine recently commented that, the young are lost. I said, no way. I said they have a lot of pressures. Maybe they don't know what to do, but they definitely know what they don't want to do. So it's a
Exactly.
different problem than my generation had, if
So
that makes sense.
it does. It makes perfect sense. So let's go back to those younger years, and from there, taking us through to here. What would you say would have been the biggest challenges that you have had to face this far in your life?
When I was a child,
No,
or
through,
now.
yeah, until now. Like take us through. What
Oh
would you say if you had to go
my
back and
God,
say,
Nina, it's a series of challenges. It's a series of huge losses. It's a series of losing loved ones. It's always a struggle to thrive, not just survive. And a constant theme seems to be having to rebuild my life all the time. And it feels like starting from square one. But the conclusion that I've reached recently is you never really start from square one. It's always on a different level. It's always, you're always evolving, changing. Maybe the theme is the same, but what you need to do and where you're going is different than where you were. As a Palestinian, it's kind of like I've inherited this drama, this loss of homeland, this loss of belonging, the loss of growing up with the same neighborhood, the same friends. That was a big deal for me, that we didn't have that. And I remember as a 5 years old, I watched my mom in 1967, like literally break down to pieces when we've lost the war and the rest of Palestine became occupied. That was like an earthquake that shook me to the roots. And I've only just realized 2 weeks ago that this is the original earthquake that I've experienced. And then we went through it in Jordan. My family, my father bought a home. And then again, there was a civil war in 1970. And then, before that in Palestine, they went to Yemen. Then there was a war. They left. They went to Egypt. There was a 1956 war. They left. They went to Kuwait. And then there was the Iraqi invasion of 1990 and so on. So it was like, this theme of having to survive, but also thrive. It's like a double whammy. And then to lose, like really, really close. We're a very close-knit family. And the greatest loss was my grandmother. I grew up with one grandmother, so she was a big deal in my life. That was a shock. And then to suddenly lose my father, again, that was a shock. And then to lose my brother, that was the greatest shock. He was my best friend. He was my older brother. One of my survival nets, in my mind, someone I could always, refer to, go back to. And then in the last 18 months or so, I've lost my husband again, all of a sudden. And then last year, a few months ago, I lost my mom. And it was just a huge void that I had to learn to accept because I was very angry, very, very angry. And I couldn't accept these losses. And I felt like, why me, And how many times did I have to go through this loss? Especially after leaving Kuwait in the Iraqi invasion, I moved to London and I told my parents I'm moving to London. And they said, oh, you're crazy. How? I said, I don't know. I'm moving to London. And I did. Somehow I managed it. I did. And I stayed there. I lived in London for about 26 years. And I met my husband. My husband was English. And we got married. It was a beautiful marriage, beautiful day that my brother was there for. My sister couldn't, so that was another pain because she immigrated to Canada, my brother immigrated to Australia. I mean, whichever angle you want to look at it, it was this pain of separation that eventually translated into loss of a loved one. So my husband's work moved to Dubai. So that was great. And I remember telling him jokingly, like, oh my God, I ran away from the Middle East. I stayed in London. And after all these years, I marry an Englishman who takes me back to the Middle East. And then to have to lose him here was the greatest loss ever, really. And then I lost my mother of a ripe old age, but still, somebody once asked me, was it expected? I mean, when do you expect to lose anyone, any loved one? So even though she was 92 and she left really well, it's still that pain, She kept me going, especially after Andrew passed away. And for me to lose her, suddenly there was no one around me. There was no reason to live for. I'm sure you can understand that. And I really struggled to collect my life and put it back together again. Here we are.
Thank you for sharing, Sahar.
I needed to come on the program and I needed to tell people or let them know that no matter how big your loss is, it does get smaller by the day. And you need to make that shift again and ask yourself, okay, what is it showing me? What can I rebuild now? I remember a friend of mine, I was telling him how much I was struggling by email, and he said, well, that's, you had a great love. You shared a great love with Andrew. And he said, that's the price of love. And that kept going in my mind. And I thought, my God, I'm glad for that love, even though the loss was absolutely immense. But then I smile and I remember what we shared, and I would not have replaced that with anything. So maybe we need to accept the great things that we had, and losing them reminds us of that great gift that we had, rather than, oh my God, I lost something. I don't think we ever do. Physically, we may not see them, we may not be with them, but here, I always felt that they were close. I even talk to them, out loud. I mean, I don't know if they hear or not do, but for me, it makes me feel better. And I say good morning every day, and I say good night. I look at the photograph, and I say good night every night. And I daydream, I think of them, and then I go back to this reality, and I keep telling myself, well, if they were here, they would want me to live my life, and not be absorbed by whatever drama that I went through.
Yeah.
So in a sense, they inspire me to keep going. And that's how I look at it. And this is how I've been managing really in the last few months.
Wow. I'm listening to you, Sahar.
God
I'm
bless
getting.
you. Well, your loss was a great one, and my heart,
I
went out to you, because I feel your pain, having been
yeah.
there and lost all these, people that were really my life,
You're so right. And I'm just thinking back to our conversation before we started recording, and me saying that this was the first interview I was doing this way. And I'm not comfortable yet with this because I feel that I'm not close to my guests. And I feel so close to you right now. And I almost feel like we're in the same room. It doesn't matter that we're in different physical places. Hearing you talk about the losses of the key people in your life, from your husband to your mother, your brother who was your best friend, and your father, homeland, and I could almost feel the peeling of our skins, as we said before, but also in understanding that I really feel that death is not about those that have parted. It's about those that have to stay behind and continue living.
Yes.
How did you overcome, and how do you overcome? I mean, waking up every day is hard,
Very
and
hard.
then waking up and saying, "Okay, we're doing this. Let's make it the best we can." How do you do that?
I didn't know how to do it, but I'm fortunate enough to have a network, maybe, of really close friends, but also clients who've been with me for like 26 years. And a friend and a client sent me a message from the States. Megan, her name is Megan Patel, and she said, Sahar, you grieve any way you want to. Don't listen to anyone. Do you want to wear black? Wear black. Do you want to cry your head off? Take your time. Don't let anyone push you, because you hear all sorts of things. Oh, it's taking you a long time to grieve. Oh, you're grieving too quickly. You're getting over it too quickly. Well, there isn't too quickly or too fast. You have to do it your way.
Mm.
So I wanted to give myself the chance to grieve, and it was very different with every loss. With my father, I couldn't cry for 2 years. And this is where I resonated with your videos. Everyone told me, be strong, be strong. And I didn't know how to be strong. What that meant is suppress your feeling, your sadness, your anger, and be strong for your mom. So I was, and it took me 2 years. And then I broke down. I broke down into tears, into sobbing, because I had to acknowledge I am not strong, and I don't believe in strength. I believe in resilience, which is quite different from strength. And I remember something that my mother said. She said, be flexible. It's the strong tree that breaks in the wind, but the soft tree that kind of meanders with the wind. So I've been trying to be that way, to know where my roots are, but to keep an open mind and go with the flow, so that I won't break. I've studied also civil engineering, and one of the things that I've learned in my civil engineering day is how to make cement, and how to make a building strong. And then I was wondered, like, why does strength come at that value? Pressure per square inch. What happens if we make it stronger? And what you do if you use more concrete and you make a building strong, it buckles immediately. So more strength is not necessarily the answer, because the harder you try to stay strong, I think it makes you more vulnerable and more brittle, if you will, to the forces of nature, which is life's events. in this case on a personal level.
Yeah.
So I sat in my garden, to be honest with you, Maria. I spent a lot of time dazing, not knowing what to do. And then the weather started changing, and I was just looking at the plants, and the same plant, the same beautiful tree, half of it was dying, and half of it was growing new buds and new leaves. And I just looked at that, and suddenly nature showed me the answer that death makes the way for the new. You know, the old go
Yeah.
and they make way for the new. And I thought, oh my God, if Andrew and mom moved out of the way, is to make me see something. Because I also believe that nobody dies before their time. I mean, that's, you know, how complex human beings and beliefs are. I mean, they don't. You don't live a day longer than you need to. You don't go a day before you need to. But it's accepting that mentally is one thing, and getting it into your heart is another. And I struggled to connect my heart with my thoughts, you know, my feelings with my thoughts. But in an odd way, having seen that, I thought, okay, my garden is now empty, which is my life. I'm talking, you know, metaphorically now. What am I gonna grow? What is my life about? You know, what is it that needed to move? What is it that needed to reveal itself by having these two orbits? You know, these two focus points that I was orbiting around, because you know Andrew was really home. He was my life, and my mom I had to look after. I was looking after for the last 7 years of her life. So she really became part of the weave of my life, and to lose these two things in 1 year, in less than a year, was a bit too much. And then I thought, okay, what is it? And you know, if you keep asking for inspiration, for guidance, it does come. And the answer was, you know, get on with your life. Now you have the time to do what you want to do. Now you have the time. And this is where, you know, my brand, the unboxing theme came up. It's like, you know, what is holding me back, or what am I holding back? And I thought, fine, however many years I have, I need to get over myself. I need to unbox. I need to continue whatever, working online, doing live shows, you know, things that I've never done before. And I'm working in a way that hasn't even occurred to me, although I've been doing this for 29 years. And I found myself stuck, and I needed to earn money because, you know, all the money was gone on surgeries and expensive medicine and things like that. So that was added pressure. And then I thought to myself, I need help, I admit. And a friend said, you know, have you ever worked with a business mentor? And I thought, no. And she said, you know, meet so and so. And thank God, you know, thank heavens that I did, because I really didn't know where to begin from. And my point is this: when you find yourself rock bottom, you can choose not to stay there. You can say, okay, I admit I need help. Where can I go? And an intelligent person would do that. An unintelligent person would stay stuck admiring their victimhood, but that's not in my nature, because I don't believe that anything is against us. It's all circumstance that is forcing us, you know, like fire polishing metal. It's circumstance that polishes you to bring out your best, not to destroy you, because the whole theme of life is birth rather than death, but that death is part of life. And this is like, you know, when I've come full circle in my mind, and I thought, okay, I accept the loss and let me start growing some new things. So it took me months, really, not overnight. It's a process.
It is a
But then
process.
once it has sunk through, it really did. I still cry every night out of love, you know, because I miss them. If I eat something, I remember they love it. You know, it's not like, oh, I'm strong. No. But I'm very emotional these days since COVID-19, because, you know, you're closed in, you're cut off from the outside world. And I found myself forced to bring out whatever pain there is here. I'm even sharing it live, you know, something that, I mean, would kill me. I would have never done before. And I thought, why not? You know, we are human beings as resilient, as vulnerable as we are vulnerable. You know, it's two sides of the same coin, and you can learn how to steer that and how to bring one side or live through the one side more than you do with the other.
So
Does that
much
make sense?
sense. It makes so much sense. I heard a couple of things that I resonate with as well, and this idea of strong, and why we called this journey strong is because it was the one word that I was hearing again and again, and it didn't matter how old the person was or how young. And and
The
I was
losses.
I was accepting being told that you have to be strong, but it was when I heard them telling my daughter that no, I wasn't okay with that. And I think that in losing my daughter, The biggest loss of it all was that I felt very unprepared for the next part of my life.
Yes.
Hearing you talk about your story, and I'm thinking, wow, like, it's hard to feel pain for one's own story, but actually, I'm learning on this journey that listening to stories of other women has become my healing process.
Yes.
And although I might find telling my story really hard, I don't know if it's a healing process for somebody else.
Yes.
What do you wish that you would have been prepared for
You
before
know,
the journey began?
I thought about your question. I don't think you can ever prepare. That's the mystery of life. You do your best towards your children. You do your best towards yourself. I tried in every way to educate myself, do this, do that. I mean, your parents can only do so much. And at some point, you need to realize, okay, I'm a grown adult now. So I don't want any parent to kind of blame themselves, about losing their children or the other way around, because you can only do your best. But there will always be some things that you're not prepared for. The Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, we were all totally unprepared for. This is when life changed 180 degrees overnight. Overnight. You can't prepare for it. What prepares you for anything is, I think, what comes before that. Accepting, like there are some parents in my family that protect their children too much. And I try to tell them, you're not protecting them this way. You're making them more vulnerable. Even in education now, well, before COVID-19, children are now encouraged again to play outside, not to be always in the classroom, things like that. There were studies that were made that you serve children better if you teach them to be resilient than to be, overly scared and afraid.
Hmm.
And I think if you keep that in mind, you just hope for the best. Um,
I
really, you
agree.
can't prepare. You can't prepare.
I agree that you can't prepare, but I think what I mean when I ask, what do you wish someone could have told you or taught you? You can never prepare for what is going to come because we're human. We're not robots.
I
There's
want to
not.
tell you something about other people. When we experienced the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, and I had to really restart my life, and I needed help, someone to talk to or whatever, which were not family. I mean, my family were immensely supportive. They said, okay, go. But I wanted to leave because I wanted to find myself. And everyone wants to help you, the minute you ask for help. But for me, it was totally useless because they did not walk the path that I did. So how can they help me?
Hmm.
Whatever advice they gave was generic and it was relevant to them, not to me, to my journey, to my path. So I found it more confusing. So I don't think, I'm trying to make the point that however people try and help you, in the end, they can't. They can only do their best through what they went through. But none of the people that I spoke to, for example, had experienced such a huge loss to that extent that they were able to help me in a practical way.
Hmm.
And I think my making was that vulnerability, that I didn't have any straightforward guidance, that I had to find myself my way. That is what has made me more resilient in life. So I don't think anyone could have helped. I don't think anyone did badly by me. On the contrary, there was always support, but it wasn't necessarily the support that was needed. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think it also helps anyone listening to this understand that we are our superheroes, that
Yes.
reaching out to someone isn't about telling yourself, I'm not strong enough, I'm not good enough, I don't have enough to equip myself for this next stage. It's, I am the superhero of my life, but it's nice to know that I can express myself. And it's nice to
Yes.
know that someone somewhere went through what I went through and may
Yes.
be able to share some of their learnings and some of their wisdom as well. Because I know that when we're young and we don't have enough experiences of life, and actually, even when we're not young, when we're young at heart, it's
Yes.
nice to know that there's somebody else that went through something that feels like what you're going through, And I think it's really hard when you feel alone on a journey. And
May I tell you something? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I didn't mean to interrupt. The thing that has helped me is being told by my parents, I don't know what the answer is, but I know you will sort it out.
mm,
That was my touchstone. Whenever I had an issue, I'd remember what they said. We don't know what the answer is, but you figure it out on your own. So if I were a parent, I would tell my children that more often. I certainly tell my clients that you have the ability. I think children, youngsters need to hear, I honor your individuality. I honor that you have a different life path, a different generation, a different purpose than I am. You will find the answer. That is the thing that gives me the confidence, the strength to sort it out. So I don't have any regrets, but sometimes it's a little thing that can really make a huge difference in your life. And I think if I wasn't told that, it would have taken me a lot longer to figure out my life.
I love that. I don't know the answer, but I know that you'll figure it out.
You know why? Because it taught me that even parents don't know the answer, which is a
Mm.
great thing to know that your parents are vulnerable too and they're doing their best. I mean, that is the greatest thing that can teach youngsters. We're trying to sort out life as well, but we're here for you. So it kind of removes that false belief that, life is great and so long as my parents are here, or, you know what I mean? This overprotectiveness.
Yes.
And it's nice to hear that we don't need to always have the answers, we'll work them out.
Wow. That is a real,
I,
not
I
really that.
remember I told mom once, I remember when I was in London, I moved and I stayed with the family for a while until I found my footing. And I got really upset one day, from the family, everybody pushing me around, ordering me around. And I was like really venting out on the telephone to her. And very calmly, she said, well, that's your issue. You go and you sort it out. And I thought, what? It's your family. But it was good. It was really good because it made me think like, why am I making a big deal out of this? I need to stand up for myself and do something about it. And
That's
I
so
think in
true.
these little ways, you can help the young. I don't think parents should put the pressure on themselves to know the answers to everything. That's wrong because no one does.
No.
So it's better to give a realistic thing that I'm lost too. I'm figuring this out, but I know you will, just as I sorted out my problems when I was your age. That would be a great help.
What do you think would be the top three tips for a young teenage girl watching this to gain the resilience, the confidence to get through whatever hurdle she might have in front of her?
Great question. Thank you. I would say don't compare yourself to other friends. You need to find out the unique you. Don't copy anyone. Don't put yourself under any pressure because very often the stressors come from there. My second tip would be choose someone, a person or two, whom you trust, whom you can confide into. It could be a parent if they have good relationship with the parents. It could be an auntie, a neighbor. I mean, I don't know, a friend, a classmate, but someone that you can trust. And I think it's important to have at least one person that you can not necessarily discuss, but bounce ideas off or vent to. Because if they give you a different perspective, you're immediately out of the rabbit hole that you find yourself in.
Mm,
And my third tip would be don't be afraid to ask for help. It doesn't mean there is something wrong with you. It doesn't take away from your confidence or self esteem. If you're clever enough, you will ask for help because somebody might have been down that path before you and they can show you the shortcuts and life hacks instead of getting over emotional about it.
of course.
That
That's
that's a great question. You made me think.
that is so important, this idea that it's okay to ask for help. Do you know, Sahad, I still find myself 6 months later struggling to admit that I might need help. And I'm
Yeah.
and every night I think, how did I get to this? Like, how does someone who is an educator, who works with clients, who has started strong, still find it difficult to put her hand up and say,
May I tell you why? How?
how?
Because I'm there.
How do we
I
do
think
this?
I think by trying to be strong for someone else, you put yourself on a pedestal. I don't mean you. I did myself. When I lost Andrew and my brother, I thought to myself, I need to be strong now for my mom, for my sister, for my, for my husband, and that means that we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And once you put pressure, your mind is not free to get inspired. So it's
Mm,
almost like you fall into this role that you have to play, that you've put yourself into, that leads to even more stress and pressure.
of
So
course.
I would say we need to, and women do that particularly, because we're all into women empowerment and whatever. And I'm into people empowerment.
Yes,
Don't put labels, because labels, allow you to download a different game that maybe you don't want to play.
of course.
So don't be strong, don't be perfect, be present, I would say, for your daughter, but don't put that pressure on you that you get so vulnerable to the point that you don't ask for help.
Yes,
And
of
I think
course.
that's the greatest thing. And I'm asking for help now more frequently. Very often I get different answers, but it's okay. I'm not disappointed. And sometimes the answers come from a different person, not the person that I asked.
Mm,
So again, that's another lesson that I have really learned, is not to expect help from people that I think should help, but maybe just by asking, it will actually open up the door for another person to help. And that was a big thing. That was a change maker for
that's a
me,
big,
because it
it's
made me, let go of, well, he's my relative, he should help me. Why should he? I've had help from acquaintances, let alone friends, that goes beyond any family member's help, if you see what I mean. They were there when I needed them. It means a lot because it wasn't expected, it wasn't on my radar.
yeah.
And I just, had to learn to open up, ask the question and allow the answer to come in the most perfect way to you. But my own blinkering, my own belief system, made me think like I'm too shy, I'll ask the family, but not someone else.
Yes.
So ask and
That
and and let go of expectation, and just ask also at the right time to be guided to the right answer in whatever way that is perfect for you.
and that brings us so sweetly to our last question. I can go on and talk with you
But
for hours.
very nice
Um,
talking
I'm
to you,
very,
Maria.
I am very conscious. I can almost hear my video director saying, "Maria, keep track of time." But my
Sure.
last question, which just so smoothly carries on from what you were just saying, is in asking for help. Strong isn't just about sharing the story with the guests to our audience. It's also about how can we as a community support you on your strong journey. So how
Thank you.
can we,
That's
Sahar?
wonderful. Mention my name, mention my social handles, let people know that there's someone who went through, I don't know how to explain it, the washing machine. And came out, and so can they. And if they need any help at all, they can check out my articles, my whatever videos. There are sources that are available there. They can even send a direct message. Whatever they're going through, they will come out of it because other people have. And I think this is what you're doing with the Strong platform. It's important to know that however unique we think we are, however unique we think our circumstances are, someone else has been there and they made it through the tunnel, they made it into the light, and life will be okay. And more importantly, this is how we grow. If
Mm,
life was perfect, we wouldn't be pushed to overcome our boundaries, we wouldn't evolve.
of course. So, Sahad, what are your social handles? So, we want to make sure anybody out there watching this and really
Thank you.
resonates with your story, how can we find you?
My main website is my first name, Sahar, Sahar, Huneidi, Huneidi.com. And it seems these days that Instagram is more active. So my social handle is the @Sahar Huneidi.
Excellent.
In fact, all of my handles are Sahar Huneidi, just to make it simple. But I will send
Fantastic.
them to you, and I hope
Fantastic.
that they go through your channel and that they watch the other videos, because really I've watched all of them. And with each video, you learn something. And I want to thank you, Maria, again, because it's not easy what you're doing. It's very inspiring, and I support you 100%. So when this video is up, let me know. and I will share it with my tribe with
Thank you
pleasure.
so much, Sahar. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
It is such a pleasure. For
God bless
anyone
you.
who has just watched this episode with Sahar, I've been holding back the tears.
God bless you, honey.
It's
Well, I try to be like delicate about it, but yeah, it's okay.
it
Yeah.
has been a learning. It's filled with love and light, and Sahar has touched, I know, not just me. I'm sure so many watching this episode. Strong isn't only about stories of grief and difficulty, it's about stories, full stop. On reflection of the journey called Strong, as it evolves with every episode, I realize that I would like to be called a story sharer, not a storyteller, because they're not my stories to tell. But I'm sharing these stories with everyone around the world because I believe that by sharing stories and by hearing each other and learning from each other, we are really connecting on a global platform. And if I'm learning anything from this really challenging time called COVID 19, I'm learning that connection is my lifeline. Connection on an emotional level is something that I strive to achieve. And I hope that Strong brings that from my home to your home. So thank you so much, Sahar. And thank you to
Thank you.
everyone for watching.
Thank you. Thank you all.
We'll see you again next week.